Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Hashnode Writing Bootcamp. I am your host, Sam Sycamore. I am, of course, the content strategist here at Hashnode, which is a fancy way of saying I'm a writer. And it brings me so much joy to get to talk to you all about the art and business of writing. Today, we've got a really awesome guest for you here. But before we get into it, I just want to let you all know, for those who haven't heard the news, the session that was canceled back on Monday, that has been rescheduled for this coming Monday, the 27th. So this is not the end. Don't fear. You also still have the weekend to catch up on all the writing prompts that we've been giving out to people. So come back on Monday for the session with Catherine Peterson. But for now, we are joined by the amazing Adrian Twarog.
Hello,
And he
hello.
is, in my opinion, one of the best YouTubers in the tech community. I really appreciate what he's doing. And yeah, I'm really excited to hear what you got for us today.
Sure. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Adrian. I live here in Australia, and I didn't actually do much YouTube or anything like that until actually quite recently, only about a year ago. And I've learned a lot since then. So here I thought I'll share some of those things I've learned over the last year or so, because what I've learned is actually through a lot of trial and error. And it is essentially storytelling. And that's sort of what I wanted to focus the content around today. So I actually put together a small bit of slides here. So let's see if we can pull this up onto the screen. And hopefully this does work. So just give me a second here while I figure out how to do this. I think that's just over here. And hopefully you guys can see that, I believe. Give me a confirmation there. Yes, you can. So this is storytelling in terms of technical writing, but it's actually storytelling in general. This is the one thing that I've found is one of the strongest things that you can do when creating any type of content. Now, I didn't originally know this. It actually was something that I discovered sort of by trial and error. So let me actually tell you how I figured this out, because by figuring this out, everything I did moving forward, whether it was writing blogs, whether it was making essentially videos on YouTube, or even essentially applying for jobs or winning clients when I'm going in for some freelancing work, completely all changed because of my approach of how I went about doing storytelling. So to start off with, about a year ago, and I'll essentially show this to you in a story. I was just over here starting off. I was doing website development, and that was sort of my day job. I didn't really think too much about it, and every now and then I did a tutorial or two. And when COVID struck, I sort of thought, I want to put out some content out there, because I saw these people like Floor and Pop, for example, who grew an audience of about 30,000 people on Twitter in just about a month or so, which was insane. But I thought, I could try and do that. So I jumped on Twitter and I started putting out some content, and I got maybe 1 or 2 followers, not many, then 5, then 10. And it wasn't very much. I didn't feel very confident in myself. Another thing he did was also do YouTube videos. He decided to do 30 YouTube videos in 30 days. And that's a bit of a challenge. And I like that. There was a little bit of a story there where he was driving himself. And I wanted to do the same thing. So what I decided to do was take it a little bit to the extreme. I did 365 videos in a year. And that's basically a video every single day. And I didn't actually make it to 365 videos. I only got to about 250. But what I learned was very different than what I ended up with. Essentially, I started off making videos and content and blogs just as technical content, literally just technical content where it was sort of explaining what the tutorial is or how to implement some CSS or anything. It was really plain. And not many people were viewing it. And this is where I thought, how can I improve and get better views, get better audience? How can I make it more meaningful? Because it felt like I was doing all this work. And I'm sure everyone tells you that you need to do more blogging. You need to put more content out there. But sometimes they don't tell you exactly how to do it and what is the right way to do it to essentially get people's attention. And that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to get people's attention. I want them to actually enjoy reading the content I did. So I went about trying to improve the content I wanted to do. And it's not hard improving the content you want to do. You have to do a lot of research. And this is where I went to the drawing board and started having a look at what other creators were doing, what other people that were successful were doing. And I think that's always an important thing to do whenever you're doing anything, whether it's content writing or blogging. It's trying to have a look at what others are doing and take those lessons upon yourself, because everyone's unique and has their own way. But what I learned was that a lot of the stuff I was blogging about and doing videos about was really dry. It essentially had no life, no emotion. There was no story behind it. And there's one thing that we all remember really well, and that's a story. We might not remember the IP address or the syntax or the function we write, but we remember the story and the pain and the emotion that we felt when we did it. Even to this day, a year ago, I still remember the stories of meeting these people like Flora and Pop and those challenges they were doing. They're little stories. I don't remember what those challenges were, but I remember the aspect of that story that sort of got me passionate about starting myself. And this is why I think it's so important for people to understand that a good story when you're writing content is just as important as the content itself, whether it's a tutorial or whatnot. You'll notice that if you have looked at my videos recently, the way I go about them and even the tutorials I do are completely different. I base them upon a story or a problem I'm having or an issue. And I go into depth about that because that essentially resonates with a lot more people. And that is something you can then take to market, whether it is you're just trying to build an audience or you're, for example, trying to apply for a job, because you can tell that story. So let's actually get into that. So let's go down here to creating content. So in terms of creating content, if it's for a blog or if it's for example, just for yourself or for others, there's a few things I learned that you need to do as part of storytelling and creating that content. I like to summarize these into goals. So goals would be like, what are you trying to achieve when you're writing your content? A lot of people just don't know. And it's good to be able to sit down and have a brainstorm, have a real good idea of what you're trying to write about. For me, I just didn't know for the longest time. I did a lot of work in, say, React Native. So I did a lot of application-based tutorials on how to build apps and stuff like that. But I didn't have any goals behind it. And again, that's really important. As I slowly continued to grow and research and stuff, I found out my goals were trying to make people interested in programming and how to make it both fun and enjoyable and unique to watch. So those ended up being my goals. And a lot of the content now I try to do is more about having that sort of interest and excitement that we all feel when we're building a brand new project. So these are sort of now the kind of blogs and videos I'm writing. It's like, for example, how to build a SaaS. And like, I actually built this SaaS in 30 days and how I sort of went about these challenges. It's like a fun video and you're almost coming along with me on the journey of creating that SaaS rather than just seeing a tutorial of how to do a front end or a back end. You're going to forget about that part, but you might be excited to see that someone else has built a SaaS and you want to see like some of the things that they've done, and then you might want to build your own. And this is what really gets me interested in terms of like blogging and reading other people's stories too. The other part is the audience. So it's good to know who you're writing about. At the start, a lot of people obviously might be writing for themselves. And I think that's one of the best places to start. So for me, my audience for the first 365 days was literally myself. I was trying to write stuff that I would have wanted when I was blogging or making videos. That's the kind of stuff that really resonated with me and I found resonated with others. If you're just trying to find what's popular, there's always going to be articles out there. But if you start off with yourself, you'll actually find out what your goals are a lot better, and you'll actually find out who your audience are a lot better after you see some of the readers. Obviously, my readers were a lot of developers, but what I found out about my audience is that a lot of developers wanted to learn design. So I found like a symmetry there of developers wanting to learn design, as well as developers just learning in stuff I'm building. So that's sort of where I understood my audience a lot better. The next part of blogging that I thought was really important is this one here. It's the value. So value is hard to express, but it essentially means that if you're going in to write something, there has to be some value someone gets out of it. Now, when you're writing for yourself, you usually know what that value is. And that's usually where I started. Like, if I can write a piece of content, the very first the very first question I ask myself is, what's the point? Why am I writing this? Are there other resources out there? Or maybe they're not describing it in the way that I want. There has to be some value out there. For me, that's also the types of videos I like to do as well. It has to essentially mean that when someone comes out of it, they're going to go, hey, I've actually learned something new. Because if they come out reading 6 minutes or watching a video or something like that, and they've learned nothing, I suppose, unless you're actually entertaining them or making jokes, like usually that's not what blogging is about, or a lot of developer related stuff. So you do need to have some value in there. Competition. Can't really remember what I mentioned about competition, but like from the top of my head, there's always going to be competition out there in terms of blogging and videos. Like everyone's going to have done every piece of content at some point. So don't feel scared, or I suppose like you're trying to compare yourself to others. You've got your own unique way to convey things and to teach things or to write about things, which goes back to the storytelling at the end of the day, because it is your story. So don't worry about what other people have written. Write it for yourself, and you'll find that you write it and you'll have your own audience that enjoys it a lot better that as well. So that's good. And then we've got the unique aspect. So the uniqueness is something that I learned when I was doing a lot of this content. I found that I started off almost repeating myself from documentation. Like, because I didn't have a story behind a lot of the tutorials I did, I was just almost regurgitating the same content. And if you find yourself doing that, that may be a lesson for you to start thinking, maybe I haven't really considered how this is actually meaningful to me. Because if you're doing that just for the sake of repeating a tutorial, then there's no real meaning behind there. What you want to do is understand, like, am I building this for something unique, my own project, for example? Because that's usually where we learn the most, if we're building something for our own our own project or something like that. So that's usually where I like to start. And even if I don't have a reason or something unique, I actually find something. I find a project and I talk about why I'm building this project, what makes me interested in this project, and why I'm using a piece of technology or learning a certain framework to implement it, because that works a lot better. And you also learn the framework a lot better too. And finally, interesting. So anything you do does have to have a level of interest in there. If you just see a title that says tutorial for React, you might think to yourself, well, I've seen 100 of those. Like, why would I want to see another? Or like a course for React. But if you see a course that says like how to build, say, a front end using artificial intelligence with React, like that's going to be a lot more interesting. You might want to essentially delve into like why you're doing this topic, and you're going to get a niche that other people just aren't going to capture. And if there's a topic that you want to do it around that. And they'll make it more interesting, and your viewers will enjoy that a lot more than just another React tutorial. So let's move on to storytelling itself. Like, what is storytelling? And how should we go about it if we're writing a tutorial or a blog or something like that? So there's a few things that's important in storytelling. The first is the hook. So the hook is essentially how you're going to capture the audience. It starts off usually with a title or even just the introduction to an article. A lot of people might say, hey, this is me trying to create a tutorial, or welcome to my first article. But like, a lot of people don't know if that's your first article or fifth article. They don't know if this is like a great tutorial or a bad one. But if you can give them a hook that'll keep them engaged, be like, I've never known this about React until I did this project, and this is a really useful tip that everyone should know if they're working on a project. That's like a hook that sort of captures people, because it's like, what did they learn? Like, what did they build and what did they learn that I should be implementing in all my projects? It's a way to sort of hook people into a bit of storytelling to start off with. Then when you're doing storytelling, you have to give them a little bit of context. So this is where you take a step back now that you've given them a hook, and you want to give them a sort of like a background picture of going, hey, here's a house or a project I'm building, and here's something that was causing me pain or problems or something like that. And I was trying to figure out how to solve this thing. And this basically is giving the viewer a bit of context of what your problem is, your emotional state, so that they can feel that as well. It resonates with them. And then as you're getting into that story, you start pacing them into the actual tutorial itself. You start going, oh, I researched A and B and C. I learned E and F and G. And then as you're getting those things done, you're starting to pace that into essentially a little bit of a drama, like you're getting into a real story. And that's where you obviously are teaching them. You're doing your actual blog and portfolio. And by the end, sorry, a blog or a content. And by the end of it, you actually have the whole thing done, and you actually write out a lot more than you might have even attempted because it just comes out naturally. Storytelling is just something we all humans do. So it's important to essentially go about and try and do that in the content you do. So let's move on to the next part. But other aspects of storytelling that are really important for me anyway is talking about something personal. I know there's other stories out there that you can always talk about, like you heard this or you saw that. Those aren't the stories that do very well. The stories that are personal about you will always do better. The actual experiences of those stories and the way that you can relate with your audience means that if you are sharing stuff about yourself, you're going to get an audience that keeps coming back. Something that I learned, again, instead of doing storytelling at the start, I was just doing tutorials and stuff. I found that my audience and the people that were reading my blogs and YouTube videos and stuff like that, they just watched one for the tutorial they needed and they never came back again. And unfortunately, if you're trying to build up your blog, you're trying to do content writing, you're trying to grow that, then if you just do it essentially with no actual thing about yourself, then there's no reason people will want to come back. It's just a plain tutorial and they'll move on forever. But if you actually get them hooked into your personality, into your experiences, into how you felt, the next time they'll want to read an article about you. They want to see what you've discovered next and what you've learned from those lessons. And this is how you're sort of growing your essential channel and the content you're doing, the delivery. And this is where you can start applying it to other parts of your life. So let's have a look at that next. So this is now, you're writing content, you're writing blogs, you're doing YouTube tutorials, whatever it is, but you're using storytelling to do so. By doing so, you're going to get a couple of advantages. The first is that you're going to learn how to tell those stories a lot better. So when I started doing storytelling and I even started trying to describe experiences, I was absolutely terrible. I didn't know where to start, where to end, how to build up, people's attention and emotions and how to make jokes. Even now, I'm not very good at jokes, but the main purpose was that I learned how to talk. I learned how to describe things. And all of those lessons meant that I was more articulate about the things that I wanted to say, whether it was on a blog or whether it was on a video, or even if it was in a job interview or a pitch or anything like that. I was able to understand what people were saying and essentially talk to them and have a way to grab their attention a lot better. And that's something I couldn't do in the past. But this is something that actually took experience. You do need to do a lot of content to be able to get there. But if you focus on doing that storytelling and repetitively improving it and researching how other people are doing it and improving it, you'll essentially find your own voice. And to be able to do that natively will help other people sort of listen to what you're saying and want to work with you a lot more. After doing a lot of this content, or after doing a lot of these videos, I get so many people reach out to me now that I can almost not reply to all of them. And some are job offers, some are work offers, some are just people looking for advice or talk. And it's great. It's actually really great because it opened up so many doors for me. And if I was just doing tutorials, I don't think I would have had the same results. It's actually people were interested in who I am and what I was doing for me to be able to get there. On top of that, I've had recruiters call up, and recruitment agencies always, try to help you find a job and stuff like that. But the hard part for me was actually after describing my story of some of the blogging I was doing, some of the content on YouTube, some of the exciting projects I was working on, it actually meant that I actually hired some of my recruiters to help me with the content I was doing because they were so excited with what I was building. And obviously, they also got me good leads and jobs. I got like a job for over $40,000 from one of my leads simply because I told them the kind of stuff I was doing, and they just were so excited. They essentially sold me to their client. And it's that thing that you hook a person with your story that they'll be engaged. They'll start promoting you because they just will enjoy the kind of stuff that you do. So this is sort of where I started applying storytelling to just day-to-day stuff I'm doing. So the next part of storytelling, I think, is really important. This is before we move on to continually improving, is to listen to people. So while blogging and storytelling are one aspect, you're also going to get feedback from people. You're also going to have other people's stories to also listen to. One of the hard things that I find that people often don't do is actually listen to the community and listen to people they're speaking to. It's a really hard thing to do sometimes, just to completely stop thinking. Because I know that I have my monkey brain always thinking, oh, what's this person thinking of me? Can I say the right thing? Switching all of that off and just listening to what other people say, or even just researching what the community is currently thinking, will help you better understand what kind of content you can put out there. So one of the things that I personally do just to improve the content that I do is I literally jump on Hashnode. I read all the latest articles. I jump on other forums like Reddit and stuff like that. I even have a look on YouTube what the top videos are. And it sort of gives me an idea of what kind of stories and what kind of content people are there. And it gives me an idea like what I want to create, like what's something that is important to me, but is also sort of in the spotlight. So that sort of helps me create those stories. And let's move up here to continually improving. So this is storytelling in its essence. So the one thing about storytelling that you'll notice, and if you do some research into, is that it's a sort of a circle. You start at starting and you apply yourself. You learn something new and you put those new learnings into application, into a blog or a video or something. And once you've done that, you might find new results and you come back to the beginning where you're essentially where you started, but you've learned something new. The next thing you want to do with storytelling, essentially, whether it's yourself or the content you do, is repeat that cycle. Go out, learn something new again, improve yourself again, improve the stories you're writing. Storytelling is essentially starting where you are, doing that cycle and coming back to it and learning something new. You want to do that whether it's your new audience, whether it's your new content. I think that's one of the things I've learned. Like, I'm still in this exact same room. And if you see a video of me a year ago, you'll see that it's exactly the same background. But I feel like the person I am now, the content I've done now has completely changed me. So that's only because I've been consistent. I've been doing this thing, and it's essentially where I am. And I hope that all of you will be in the future too. So that's me. Now, I suppose that's a quick one, but I'm open to a lot more questions, and I'm happy to talk about storytelling. So let's actually open up the chat here. I don't know if Sam, you want to jump in as well, and we can have a look
at totally
about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for this presentation. This has been really insightful. Yeah, there were a lot of great points in there. I love that point about being a good listener and how like being able to actually pay close attention to what people are saying will make you a better storyteller and a better creator. I think that's really key advice.
Definitely. I find that a year ago, personally, whenever I was talking to someone, I would always be thinking, what should I say next? What should I do next? Or what shouldn't I say? And that meant that I almost wasn't really actively listening to them. I was sort of only half listening. There's so many nuances that you miss. Like if you're not focused at a person's facial expressions and how they're feeling and how they're acting and what they're saying, and sometimes what they're not saying when they're saying stuff, like all of those things might be lost. And you get so much better attention if you just switch everything off and put 100% focus on that person.
Absolutely. I love that. All right, let's pull up some questions here. For folks, if you haven't been doing these with us before, you can head on over to the Q&A tab there next to chat to ask questions or to upvote. I'm going to sort this by number of upvotes, see what the most popular questions are. So let's get this one up here. This comes from Saharsh, who asks, does it help to write technical facts first and then weave a storyline around them? Because it is quite difficult to include a storyline when your article is strictly technical.
Sure. I would say the first paragraph or the first sentence sometimes doesn't even have to be like a full story, but in there you can add in like a meme or something, a tidbit or something interesting to engage the user. Because anyone who's out there to read a tutorial will immediately be reading it for a tutorial. So you already have that audience. But the audience you might not have is the people that are just discovering new content. So if you can make that more engaging by making something humorous or story related in there to capture their attention, then that's always a good thing. It doesn't have to be the whole article, but the first 15 seconds that a person reads or writes that first paragraph is vital, whether a person continues to read or not. So I would avoid any technicalities in that first paragraph if possible.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Just like placing that introductory context, like this is why I'm here, this is how I got here. That's all the stuff
Exactly.
that's going to hook people and make that connection. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, let's get another one up here. Okay, this is an interesting question from Maxi, who asks, how do you get people to come back to your articles? How do you build personal hooks and grab attention?
So that's quite complex question, but let me jump into the very first part, which is how do you get people coming back to your articles? So I suppose the first thing is to understand what kind of people are going to your articles and what kind of people you're looking for. Because if, for example, you're looking to do content on, say, mobile applications, say React Native specifically, then essentially you just have to put out content for React Native and you'll find those same people will be coming back. But if your content's all over the place, then unfortunately, yes, you might find that people won't be coming back. So it's really structuring and understanding like what niche do you want to start writing content in and who's the audience for that niche and applying a consistent sort of lot of articles or content around that. In terms of then how to build a personal hook and grab attention, it really depends on you. Like every single person will have their own unique way to do it. Some people I know can do it with just jokes. Like Ben Awad, for example, is great at doing that. Whereas other people, like say Fireship.io, NetNinja, is really good at just having a articulate thing done in like 100 seconds, for example. So people keep coming back to that. So it's understanding what works for you and sort of applying that consistently. And then people will discover that, they'll find that they're interested, and then they'll keep coming back because of that. And that sort of works hand in hand with the hook and grabbing attention because it's sort of the same thing.
Right on. Great advice. All right, let's get another one up here. Okay, this is an interesting question. This comes from Brian, who asks, what's your personal favorite piece of content that you've created that demonstrates this concept well?
Sure. I suppose I've got three big ones that I've done. One of them is like I got myself a bigger monitor, like a Samsung. It was the biggest monitor I ever got. So I actually put out like a little tweet that says, is a developer better with a bigger monitor or are they worse? And that tweet went off. So I actually turned that into a full story. I'm like, do you do development better with a bigger monitor or a smaller monitor? Like it doesn't seem like much thing. It was just like I bought a monitor, but like I turned that into a whole story and that turned into a whole video that was like 8 minutes long. And it was also a article I wrote, and that's like one of my most popular ones. It was just something there. Another one I did was about coding. Oh, let's see. Yeah, coding on the iPad. It was like before GitHub came out with a dot that you can do to get into GitHub with like a browser version of VS Code. So it was essentially like how to start coding on my iPad. It was talking about the story of that. And the final one I did with Twilio. Twilio one hasn't gone viral yet, but it was essentially how to use Twilio, which is SMS, to create a chatbot. And I wanted to create a chatbot that essentially was like pretending to be Steve Jobs. It was like a really cool one, but it was also like a technical article at the same time.
Right on. I love that first example, especially about getting a new monitor, because it's like I feel like something that people often bump up against when they're thinking about storytelling is just like, well, I don't really have any interesting stories to tell. Like, what do I have to talk about? It's like, well, did you buy a new keyboard recently?
Yeah.
That could be something that's interesting to people.
Exactly. Like there's literally a story around anything you think of. It's just sitting down and brainstorming that. And you might not even realize, like, until you look at yourself, because everyone has their own experiences and stories, like what kind of stories you'll create. And each person will be unique with that, which is like why it's also so exciting, because that means that everyone has the opportunity to write those.
Absolutely. I love that. All right, let's get another question on up here. This is a good question. Comes in from my friend DVKR, who asks, how do you know if an article has too much story, like a stereotypical recipe blog?
Too much story. I've found that I'm not sure in terms of like reading content. It's usually about 6 to 8 minutes is about the sweet spot these days for people's attention. And 6 to 8 minutes is essentially as well on YouTube. Anything after that is too long. So if you can keep it within those confines, you'll probably keep someone's attention to view that story. Of course, that is constantly decreasing with like TikTok and stuff like that. That like soon it'll be like if you read an article in 2 minutes, that might be like the future or like how much attention you can have for people. But at the end of the day, like if it's a good story, then people will remain to watch it. Like you have a look at really popular people, like Mr. Beast, for example. He doesn't do written content, but like he does videos. And if you actually have a look at his videos and how he does them, they're not like, oh, how to, win a house. It's actually there's a story in there of how you're going to win that house. And it's actually more complex than that. There's actually multiple stories in each one of his videos that cross together of who's going to win the house and how. And like this is a really good example. If you ever want to learn about how to do storytelling and content around something completely bizarre, whether it's like staying in a circle or not, have a look at one of his videos and you'll see so many stories in a one timeline for one topic. And this is how he's keeping people's attention.
That's great advice. I like that. All right, let's we got another one here. Okay, this is an interesting question. Comes from our friend Rick in Tijuana, who asks, how did you start your storytelling? That's one of the things that's hard to me. I have the idea of what to write, but no idea of how to turn it into a story.
Yeah. Because I do a lot of videos, that actually helped me because with a video and with a story, you're almost sort of going in symmetry together. So I'll do two things. I'll record myself doing a project from start to end. Even if I'm like not doing anything, I'll just record myself just browsing the net or something like that. And then every hour or half an hour, I'll talk to the camera and be like, I did this and I did that. And I'm sort of creating the story in itself already there. And sometimes I have like a main outline that I have in Notion that I just write out of what I plan to do. And sometimes it's completely different. But this sort of logging my journey of doing something and then looking back is almost the story in itself already. And then you're just repeating that or creating content around that. So that's sort of the way that I go about it. I don't know if that helps, but let me know.
I think that's good advice. Cool. Here's another one from our friend Katie in Orlando. Said your tutorial about UI design using Figma is my favorite tutorial ever and made me excited about UI UX. That one was easy to tell a story through. That one was easy to tell a story though, since it was very visual, or easy to tell a story through. Sorry. How would you find a story to tell when teaching a drier, less visual concept?
Yeah. There's lots of ways. Like if you have a look at people online talking about how to do interview coding tips, like for example, that in itself is like a little micro story because it's a really dry topic. You're learning about how to do array sort or something like that. Yet they'll be talking about it in maybe a fun, interesting way. Like, I'm a job interviewer and I'm a job applicant, and here's me trying to solve it. But at the same time, you might show them how to solve it while making like a little story or a sketch around it. So that's like, there's a way you can create a story about most things. It's just really sitting down and making it interesting. That's sometimes you do have to put in more time. You do have to put in more effort. But of course, anything of value or worth, you're going to have to do that.
Absolutely. Cool.
And thank you for liking that Figma one. I spent a lot of time on that one. So it's good to hear that. I've got obviously another one coming soon, but it's a half a year in the making, which is my other UI course, which eventually will be out.
Awesome. That's really exciting. Cool. Let's get another one up here. This is from Oluwashina in Nigeria, who asks, what's a professional way to address folks who drop negative comments on your content?
Yeah, that's a good one. To be honest, like, I see any negative content as something that both I listen to, but also try to understand. So sometimes one person who might say something negative, there might be like another 10 to 100 that might not say it. Otherwise, sometimes it just might be negative for the sake of being negative. So I usually don't personally respond to negative content. I'll read it and I'll decide, is this something that I want to learn a lesson from and improve myself on? Was there something key that I can pull out of this as value and then research and improve? Or is this just hateful content? And if it's hateful content, I just put it behind me and move on.
Good call. Yeah, I think that's that's an interesting point that you bring up. Just that idea that it's worth taking negative comments seriously, at least at first glance, because it could signal that if one person comments, then there may be other people who are thinking it too, and maybe it's something worth looking into. But yeah, and then some people are just mean for the sake of being mean. There's no reason to listen to them. They want you to be upset at them, so don't give them what they want.
Of course. And at the end of the day, in every aspect of life, in every subject, there's going to be people that agree and people that disagree. And then at those higher levels, there'll be some people that absolutely love it and absolutely hate it. So there's no getting around that. That's just part of life.
Right on. Cool. Let's get a couple more questions here. This is an interesting one from our friend Avnish. It says, is it good to make a story where I put the reader in a role of the story?
It depends, because obviously these days we live in a society where people want to be entertained and they don't want to do things on their own usually. The more that you can sort of deliver on that so that they're getting valuable content without having to do something, usually is the way that I go about it. I haven't actually done that many like projects where I engage viewers to actively do something. So I suppose I don't have enough experience there, but that's something I could definitely try out in the future. Yeah, that's unfortunately I don't have the best answer for that, but that's all I have for now.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think you bring up a good point there about like I think you have to be careful approaching it, because you might be asking your reader to do too much work. Like if they have to think too hard about what's going on, they might just be upset and
Like
leave it alone.
even an active role in a story, like for example, I might have an active part of my video or my article say literally hit that like button, for example. And even if I actively say this every single time in a video, at maximum, I'll get 9 to 10% of people doing it. And this is like just pressing one click on a button. So like, I don't see people moving their mouse that far to do a lot of things these days, I suppose. If I saw more, then I would say I would be more confident in getting them to engage. But I feel like having them jump onto that article or reading the content is already like the level of engagement at the top of that I would expect.
Yeah, that's a great point. Cool. All right. Let's get let me just go through these one more time. We'll get one or two more questions here. This is an interesting one. This one comes from my friend Bridget in Omaha. Says, what do you think about struggle content? For example, if this and that went wrong, would that make you come off as less of an expert?
Actually, I think that'll make you look more like an expert. I'm sure that any expert will tell you that the struggle is what makes an expert, essentially. It's actually going through that pain. There is no project I've ever done, there's no even tutorial I've done that I haven't felt that pain. And sometimes, even when I'm describing that, like people can relate to that, like that issue of like trying to navigate through Stack Overflow, finding the right solution. Like everyone can resonate with that kind of thing. And if anything, it'll help people emote to you a lot better too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Excellent. All right. There's one more I saw that I thought was interesting. Yes, I think this is something that a lot of creators struggle with, especially when you're just getting started. This comes from Alex in Romania, who asks, how do you share your content without feeling like you're being annoying to your friends and followers?
Um, Let me think about this question for a bit. So when you say annoying, I suppose like is this something you're feeling or they're feeling? Because as I sort of mentioned at the start, like when you're building out content, the first thing you want to do is build it for yourself. You yourself have to be proud of it. And when you're really proud of something, there's nothing anyone can say that will, annoy you personally. And slowly over time, like the people that won't enjoy your content, they'll go. But the people that will enjoy your content, they'll stay and they'll slowly grow. And you'll sort of build and improve yourself as time goes on. So I would say, don't worry about what other people say. Really build something for yourself and you'll do it really well.
Right on. Excellent advice. Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much wraps it up here. That was most of the questions we got, and we appreciate everybody for hanging out. And Adrian, thank you so much for being here. This has really been a pleasure.
No worries. Thank you.
Yeah, right on. Cool. Well, yeah, like I mentioned at the top, everybody, don't forget this is not the final session. There is one more to go. On Monday, the 27th, we will be joined by Catherine Peterson, who's going to be talking about how to grow your professional network on social media. So, to the person who just asked about what do you do when you feel annoying about sharing your stuff, I think you'll get a lot out of Catherine's talk. If you don't know Catherine, she shared a project that she built one weekend on Twitter, and that eventually landed her a job at GitHub. So yeah, don't feel like you're being annoying. You got to put yourself out there.
Oh, that's amazing.
uh, yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. So we're excited for that. And also, for everybody who's doing the writing prompts along with us, the writing prompt for today, if you haven't gotten it yet, is think about how to incorporate storytelling into your own work. Where can you insert personal hooks? How can you grab the reader's attention by creating a story? Take them on a journey, right? Share your own journey, your own process of how you worked through some problem. And yeah, we're really excited to see what you got.
Beautiful.
So I think that's everything I got to say. Please join us on Discord. That is the Bootcamp 4 channel, where we're all hanging out, sharing articles. You can get some feedback. And yeah, thanks everybody so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Uh, yeah, thank you, Adrian. All
Just
right.
shared the Figma board there if anyone wants to check that out. So that's just in chat there. Feel free to like
Awesome.
copy that across if you like.
Cool. Thank you so much. All right. We will end it here. Take care, everybody.
Cheers.
See ya.